Cuomo, welcome to Prime Time. Big news tonight on the Senate's Russia investigation. Republicans and Democrats agree, and their findings put big holes in the president's pitch to his base about the so-called witch hunt. Meanwhile, the FBI agent that kicked off the Russia investigation is now being summoned back to the Hill. Peter Strzok is going to testify in public next week. Is he walking right into a GOP trap? That's what his lawyer claims. Why? He's going to make the case to you. And did you hear? LeBron James signed with the LA Lakers. So what's going to happen when the biggest name in basketball comes face to face with the most outspoken father in the game? You know who I'm talking about. The ball is in our court tonight. LeVar Ball. Anything can happen when he's on live TV. What better way to celebrate Independence Day Eve? So what do you say? Let's get after it. All right, let's go to the whiteboard and start talking about this big news that dropped today, the Senate Intel Committee findings on Russian interference. Hopefully this will help you break down the headlines. All right, here's what you want to keep in mind. First, this was bipartisan, okay, in the Senate Intelligence Committee. But it was GOP-led. Chairman Richard Burr, hardliner, no joke, not looking to please anybody. They spent 16 months looking at this. And here's the big headline. The intelligence community got it right. The quote is, no reason to dispute those conclusions. What are they? Russia meddled as part of an elaborate scheme to disrupt our democracy. Putin motivated it, and the Kremlin had a clear preference, and that preference was for Donald Trump. Now, this also wasn't a matter of everyone getting their story straight. The Senate committee saw how there were different levels of confidence between the agencies. You had the CIA and the FBI. They had high confidence. The NSA only felt moderate confidence on some aspects. So Burr's report calls the disagreements reasonable, transparent, openly debated among the agencies and analysts. In other words, smart people were allowed to make their case, but they all pointed in the same direction. And most importantly, the Senate committee found analysts were under no political pressure, no politically motivated pressure is how they worded it. What does that mean? No bias. And all of this exposes the House Intel Committee efforts, basically as BS, especially those led by its chair, Devin Nunes, which were clearly geared to undermine the intelligence community. His report found, quote, significant intelligence tradecraft failings. Yet tonight, even his Republican counterpart in the Senate is on record and calling Nunes's bluff. The job was done right, shows a clear plan and preference. That means that Trump's saying that this didn't really happen. Putin denies it. It's not real. Didn't matter anyway. All false. Exposes the Trump tripe. It is also a great tee-up for a great debate. And we have two perfect men for the task, Van Jones and David Urban. So, Van Jones, you heard my assessment. Do I have it right? Do you think that this is a big blow to the president's posturing of this not being a big deal and didn't really happen?
Well, it definitely is, and especially when you realize that, the Republicans have the majority. If there were some reason for them to say, hey, guess what? Surprise, surprise, the president's right, the agencies are wrong, there's a much bigger political upside for them to do that than to do what they did. But what should happen now, it won't, but what should happen now is that now that you've got a bipartisan, Republican-led, but bipartisan statement that says for sure we are under attack, we should start coming together now. We shouldn't be, oh, well, what about this, what about that? We've got a problem. We've got a democracy being undermined, and yet I guarantee you, you're not going to have the president walk up tomorrow morning to a microphone and say that, and that's unfortunate.
Well, you don't have to be a prognosticator, Dave. We just had the president put out a tweet a few days ago, with plenty of information about the reality, saying, Putin denies it. Now, help us understand. Why would the president say something that he knows his intel community doesn't share, that he knows is probably untrue, but he says it anyway?
Hey, Chris. Well, first of all, let me just start by congratulating you after 30 days on the air of having the #1 rated show on CNN.
Oh, very kind. Why didn't you mention that, Van?
Great.
Jealous? Thank you very much. Look, it's because of you guys.
Yeah,
You've been helping me out every night. You bring your expertise, you bring your passion, and we thank you. Now,
Chris,
make your point. No favoritism
Chris,
for you.
Yeah, listen, I don't know. As people know, watch this. I don't necessarily agree with you, but I love being on your show because I think you're fair. Give everybody a fair shake here. So, look, it's not surprising. I don't agree with you and Van. I don't think there's a whole lot of new news here. Director Mueller has already indicted, we've come to this fact already, right? Director Mueller indicted 13 Russians, and the IRA troll factory, Internet Research Agency troll factory out of St. Petersburg, indicted these 13 individuals. The Secretary of Treasury, Steve Mnuchin, has imposed sanctions on them, shutting them down, kicking them out, really cracking down on them. So I don't know if there's a whole lot of news.
But the president just tweeted that Putin says it didn't happen.
Hold on.
Can't ignore that.
Hold on. Well, he did. Well, no, Putin. I'm sure Putin says it didn't happen, right? But let me say one thing that's missing from all this analysis, right? Senator Bernie's a good man, and he's a very fair-handed individual. But what's missing from this analysis is, did it have any impact? The Russians may have tried. This Internet Research Agency did a bunch of things that were malicious in our election, and I'm hoping right now that the FBI counterintelligence, our CIA, and other agencies are moving aggressively to make sure that doesn't happen in 2018 and 2020. But the question that nobody's asking, and we don't have an answer to, is that did it matter? Did it have any impact? And that's what's missing from this analysis.
Do you agree with that, Van?
Well, I just don't understand why that is this kind of teddy bear that the Republicans want to cling on to. It's this fear
no, it's not a teddy bear. Did it matter?
Yeah. Hey, listen, here's the deal. I cannot imagine that in an election when you had 120, 130 million people voted, that was decided by only 70,000 people in about 3 states, 10,000 people in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania. That's a pretty narrow margin. And so we need to find out, did it have an impact? I think it's hard to
let me just tell you this,
it had
Chris.
zero impact.
I read the indictment. I read Director Mueller. I read the indictment handed down by Director Mueller, and some of the verbatims that were in there lifted from this. And I was involved in the election in Pennsylvania, and interestingly, Van and Chris, even the Russians didn't think the president was going to win in Pennsylvania. They didn't even bother doing anything in Pennsylvania. They skipped over the state.
Hey, listen.
So to your point, Van, did it matter? Listen, we want fair and square. Fact of the matter is, fair and square.
Hey,
we want.
I don't understand why that's the sole bar. Just to emphasize a point that Van was making, Gabe, so you can help us. I don't understand why you want that to be the litmus test for whether or not Russian interference in your election matters. It matters on its face.
No, Chris, absolutely it matters.
But when you say did it matter in the outcome, are you suggesting that unless you can show that they manipulated a vote count, that it doesn't matter? Because that's what the president seems to apply as a standard.
No, listen, I think the president is angry with the news media, and rightfully so, because they're trying to delegitimize his election.
But where do you get that? You just put out there, did it matter? And you had 2 people who get targeted by the president who didn't jump up and say, yes, it did. It was really bad. It's the only reason he won.
Listen,
so why demonize us?
The next time I talk to him, I'll make sure to give you and Van the props with him, okay?
No, but I'm saying I've never heard anybody say in the media that we have to get to the bottom of this because it's the only reason he's president. That's only him who says that.
No, that's only the left of center. Listen, Chris, if you honestly saying, and Van, if you guys are both honestly saying that the left does not say that, but for this meddling, Donald Trump wouldn't be president.
I've heard that about Comey.
I think that's kind of farcical.
I've heard that about Comey, but I think that the big concern, Van, left, right, and center should be they're going to do it again. And we've been so busy dealing with definitions and parameters so that Trump can be safe at the end of this analysis that we haven't done anything to stop it happening again.
Chris, I don't know. Listen, I don't know.
No, it's my turn. It's my turn.
Let Van go, then Dave will bounce back.
It's my turn. So here's the deal. A couple of things. There were people under Obama who said Obama cheated. He wasn't even born here. The whole thing, it was Acorn, all these different things. You always have some people in the losing camp that just won't accept the election. You have people on the left who will say, he cheated, the whole thing was engineered, it was hacked, the whole deal. All of that stuff is just a normal part of the process. But what's unusual is for the President of the United States to disregard and to dismiss and to diss his own intelligence agencies, because the President and the rest of us are supposed to be above all that, focused on protecting and preserving this democratic republic. And any threat, foreign or domestic, he took an oath to oppose.
I agree.
And that's the problem.
But you didn't call it out, Dave.
No, listen,
you went right to the idea of, did it matter?
Guys, listen. Let me ask you a question. Do you know, can you tell me, do you know what the FBI counterintelligence folks are doing in this country at this very point in time, what the NSA is doing, what the CIA is doing overseas?
I do.
You know what they're doing?
I do.
You do?
Whatever they're doing.
Okay. Don't say it on the air because they're violating some classified.
That's what they're doing. If they're doing a good job, they're ignoring their president who says, poo on all of you guys. There's nothing going on here. So I hope they're ignoring the president.
I mean, look, that's the big headline from today, is that you now had a really bipartisan group. Now what that mess happened in the House. Come out and say, the intel community's right. It was real, it was intentional, it was bad, and it's going to happen again. The president doesn't echo those sentiments. Maybe now he will. We got to leave it there. We got to leave it there. Dave, Van, please enjoy your entire experience with Independence Day. I am happy for both of you guys on my show.
Chris, thanks for having us. And tune in. Van and I are sharing some airtime on Saturday.
Beautiful. I will be watching. The two prettiest heads in the business. All right. So now we got one side of the probe and what we need to talk about, but there's another part to chew on as well. And it involves a man who is the alleged anti-Trump bias face at the FBI. He's one of the president's favorite targets. Republicans are having him come in to testify in public this time. Could it be a trap for Peter Strzok? That's what his lawyer says. His case next. All right, the president taking Vladimir Putin at his word that Russia didn't interfere with our election was always silly. It now just got dealt a huge blow with this bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee report that came out today, as it echoes the findings of every other fair broker on the situation. Russia meddled. Trump is kidding himself, and probably only himself, trying to minimize Putin's role. Now, that's just one aspect of this. And there's all this intrigue. Why would the president do this? Why would the president do that? Did Russia help him and he's trying to pay them back by being nice? I don't know the answers to any of those things, that we don't have facts. And none of them erase the legitimate issues that could be going on with the Russia probe on behalf of the U.S. authorities. Enter Peter Strzok, the FBI agent taken off the Russia probe because of these anti-Trump texts. He testified behind closed doors before a House committee last week. Now they're going to bring him back to have him testify in public. Now, his lawyer thinks that this could be a trap by the House GOP. So his name is Eitan Goldman, and he's here now to make the case. Counselor, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, first things first, will your client comply with the subpoena or the request? Will he come on in and do another interview?
My client will testify publicly soon, somewhere, sometime. We just got this subpoena today, so I don't know whether or not we are going to be testifying next Tuesday in front of these two particular House subcommittees.
Why isn't it an automatic yes, Eitan?
Because we have come to the conclusion, we've been forced to come to the conclusion that this is not a search for truth. It is a chance for Republican members of the House to preen and posture before their most radical, conspiracy-minded constituents. And if you just look, I mean, you would think that here you have a guy, Peter Strzok, knows some things, wants to tell a story, wants to testify. If you have a committee that actually wants to find out facts, that wants to find out the truth, you might actually have a meeting of interests. But from our experience with the committee thus far, it is obvious that they don't want the truth. They don't want to hear what he has to say.
You had observers who were there. The transcript hasn't been released of the last interview. I know that you've said release it. Look, I'd love that, right? I'm a journalist. I'd love to have information. I'm not in the business of believing what people tell me in the government or anywhere, for that matter. I'd like to see the proof myself. But they say that they found what he said compelling on different levels. So is it fair to say that he hasn't had a chance to tell his story yet?
Who said that they found what he had to say compelling?
Different Democrats who were in the room.
Yeah. Look, Pete has sat and listened as he's been caricatured and misdescribed and accused by the president of treason and of being a sick loser. And on Fox News, they talk about him as the center of this anti-Trump cabal that was determined to throw the election against Trump. None of this has a shred of truth. And Pete has been silent. He's been cooperating with the Inspector General. He's been doing what he's supposed to. And now he wants a chance to actually talk to the American people. So when we heard that these two committees, along with other committees, were interested in talking to Pete, I reached out to them. I said, Pete will come talk to you. You don't need to issue a subpoena. Let's do it publicly. No, we can't do it publicly. Okay, well, can you at least tell me that you'll release a transcript so you don't have House Republicans selectively leaking or misleaking selective excerpts to make them look bad? No, we can't do that either. Well, okay, we'll come in anyway. So we came in, and he testified, and what really kills me is the Republicans, the committee, the first thing they tell us in there is, this is confidential. if you disclose any of this, you could be compromising the integrity of this investigation. And not just it leaked. Republican members during breaks were dashing out to talk to the media, to tell them, this guy, he's not answering questions.
You know what you should have done?
What's that?
You should have brought your client here. Because then it would be all live. It would all be on the record. It would all be out there for people to see. And he'd be tested by someone where the audience gets to see what it is and what it isn't.
There may come a day, Chris.
The offer stands. Now, you said something earlier that I gotta come back to you on, which is there's not a shred to any of the allegations. Now, your client put himself in a position of criticism by what he wrote in his text. I understand he didn't think they'd become public when he was writing them to an intimate. I get that. But the texts came out, and they tell a story that he's going to have to answer for. Trump's not ever going to become president, right? No, he won't. We'll stop it. Now, the Inspector General's report found that he had bias for a reason, and this seems to be proof of it. I want to believe the path you threw out for consideration in Andy's office, that there's no way he gets elected. I'm afraid we can't take that risk. It's like an insurance policy in the unlikely event you die before you're 40. These are things that are suggestive of a bias against Donald J. Trump, who was running for president at the time. How's that not a fair reading?
Well, I mean, it's a completely fair reading to say that Pete Strzok and Lisa Page were not fans of Donald Trump. I think they both admit that, and they both admit that, you know, in these texts, which they thought were private and ultimately were not, you know, they used some purple language to describe Trump. And, you know, if you go through the times when they're talking about Trump, whether they call him an idiot, whether they use less polite terms, each of those corresponds to something that's happening in the campaign. You know, at one point, Trump is denigrating a family of a fallen war hero, and they have an exchange about that.
But that's justification for a feeling. What I'm saying is, if it existed as a feeling, reasonable or unreasonable, doesn't that make it true that Strzok was acting with a bias when he was doing whatever he was doing because he didn't like this guy? And how could it not affect his decisions?
No, of course it doesn't make it true. I mean, that's what FBI agents do every day, right? Everybody in the FBI has got political opinions. Trump, Pete is not the only one who didn't like Trump, and there are a lot of people in the FBI who really, really disliked Hillary and Bill Clinton. Doesn't mean that they
weren't in a position to act on a threat of, we'll stop it.
Yeah, well, I don't know why you think that that's a threat. I think that what he's...
How would you characterize it?
I think he does not think. That is right about when Trump was talking about the Khan family. And I don't think that Pete or Lisa Page or, you know, hundreds of millions of other Americans, including a lot of Republicans, thought that it was, you know, there was a chance in hell that Donald Trump was going to be elected at that point. Look, the allegations I was talking about, Chris, that don't have a shred of truth are the ones that put Pete Strzok at the center of this secret society, this Dumbledore's army type of underground cell in the FBI. There's no truth to that.
Right.
And
I mean, they took that from his conversations also, but I've never seen it substantiated. I hear you on that.
Not substantiated. I mean, the IG's been investigating this for months and months. It's a 570-page report, okay? They know why they took different decisions in the Clinton email investigation.
And he said he found bias. He couldn't find it overall, but he did find it. He couldn't rule it out in the idea of how you prioritize different investigations regarding Trump and Hillary. There's certainly things for him to answer for in there. You can't be surprised he's getting criticism.
No, of course not. And he is ready, willing, and able to answer questions about the text.
Gotcha.
The problem with this forum is that, I mean, I don't know if you watched the Rod Rosenstein and Chris Wray testimony the other day.
Hour after hour.
Okay, so the way they treated those two guys, you know, these lifelong Republicans, and not letting them answer a question, filibustering, that is nothing compared to the way they treated Pete Strzok. So
again,
it does not seem to me like a search for truth.
I hear you. I get it. I want to see the transcript so we can make our own judgments. And the offer stands. He will get a full hour here on this show to make any case he wants to make, and there won't be any fly around. Whoa! Almost got it. All right, Eitan Goldman, thank you very much for making your case for your client. The offer stands.
Okay.
See that fly run away? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. All right, you're going to want to stick around. We have one of the biggest personalities on the planet is ready to be on prime time. Lakers dad LeVar Ball is here and ready to give his take on the new guy coming to his son's team.
LeVar, we've heard the rumors of LeBron possibly coming to L.A. this summer. Do you think that it will happen?
I don't think it'll happen. I know it's going to happen. I told you to call it L.A. LeBron.
And he was right. The outspoken father of L.A. Lakers point guard Lonzo Ball back in February predicting that three-time NBA champ LeBron James would make his way to the city of angels. LeVar Ball joins us now. Welcome back to Prime Time. It's good to see you, big baller.
Hey, man, it's good to talk to you again, Chromo. You know we got to do our thing.
We're doing it right now. How did you know that LeBron was going to come there?
Come on, man. That's why people are always so mad at me, because I'm always right.
That's not why. But let me ask you this.
But it only makes sense.
You were right. It makes sense. Why? Why is this the right move?
It makes sense because, like I told him before, his narrative has to be that every team he's went to, he's won. So you can't stay in Cleveland and win 4 or 5 championships like Michael Jordan did in Chicago. You can't do that. So your narrative has to be the best player in the world. You got to say, every team I went to, I won them a championship. So that's the thing right there. And then he wants to do something after basketball, which is probably with his movie studio or whatever. So you got to go to that entertainment level in L.A. You can't get no entertainment like that in Cleveland.
So do you think
it makes sense business-wise?
So it's business-wise, it makes sense for the game. But let's talk about the second part. I get you on the business side.
Right.
He's in Hollywood. If that's the next chapter he wants, he's in the right place.
Right.
But can they win this team?
Right.
The Warriors just signed Cousins. They had the best team in the league, and now they got DeMarcus Cousins. Do you think the Lakers can beat that team?
Man, I don't think the Lakers can beat them. I know the Lakers can beat them if they get the right guys.
Oh, they need more guys. Who do they need?
You need some more guys. You got to play fast. You got to play super fast.
What do you think of them bringing Rondo on?
Fast.
Now, I know for our
got
audience,
4 years.
this is a news audience. I get it. And they probably don't follow basketball. But they brought Rondo in, the famous guy from the Celtics. You know, then he moved around the league. Plays the same position as your son. What does that mean?
Right. I don't mean nothing. Just got another teammate.
You're not worried about competition?
That's all. A little backup. That's good. Man, I'll never worry about competition because I know my boys are better than that.
And in terms of identity within the team, you got to love that you got LeBron James coming to your son's squad. But in terms of the shadow that he casts, what does that mean to you?
Nobody casts a shadow. They're just teammates. LeBron signed for 4 years. So guess what? We got to win 4 championships. But if we don't win 4 championships, we should at least get 2.
You really think that they have a chance of winning multiple championships?
Multiple championships. The only way you can beat them is playing fast. You got to have the right guys that can go fast.
Did you see this Washington Post headline where they were talking about what it's going to mean
what did it say?
To have LeBron on there? They say LeBron comes, that means big ballers got to go. The headline comes out. Welcome to L.A., LeBron James. See yourself out, LeVar Ball. The suggestion is that you two guys can't coexist. You buy that?
You know what? How can we got to worry about coexisting? He playing on the court and I'm off the court. Quit worrying about me. They did all that negativity in these field games, so that's letting you know right there. Me and LeBron to get along. He come off the court, I'm going to say, hey, LeBron, what's going on, man? Everything lines up for me, and it's so lucky that my son gets to play with his favorite player. Wait till my other boys get to come in that way. Uh-oh. You don't want LeBron and the ball boys linked up to play against Golden State, because I'll tell you what, my boys together play at a different level. Speed, baby. Speed kills. That's the only way you're going to be Golden State. Is
everything good between you and LeBron? There was that controversy when you were talking about how hard it is for his sons. He didn't like it. He said, keep his family's name out of your mouth.
Yeah. Me and LeBron got a lot in common, which is family first, winning, grinning, and having a good time playing basketball, championships.
So you say it's all good between you and him?
So anytime. It's all good. I mean, why would it be negative between us? But the best thing to do is he's successful, I'm successful, keep us away from each other. That's what they're trying to create. It's not a big thing. He's going to do his thing on that court. He has a very high IQ. My son has the same thing. This is going to be the best player. Don't give the Lakers, my son, the best player in the game. Don't think he's going to win no championships. That's why we got LeBron. Everything lines up for this, and it's going to be perfect. And you know what? People are going to be mad because it's always happening so good for me.
Well, those are just haters, though, right? Everybody should love other people's success. Let me ask you something. Speaking of success, it's not enough for you to put kids in the big league. You had to start a league of your own. Tell us about the league. I know that's why you're down in Georgia.
Yes.
You were up here on Long Island. I think at Hofstra you had a game. What's the league? What's going on?
Yes. Had a great time, man. Like I said, the JBA is another alternative for guys that could really play this game that couldn't go, you know, the university or the school way. But that shouldn't stop them from following their dream. Just because, you know, they couldn't pass the SAT or do good in class, it should not deter them to say, you know what, my basketball career is over. So we got some guys in the JBA that could really play this game, man. They just needed another opportunity and another alternative to chase their dream. And which is, you know, everybody's not going to go pro in my league, but it gives them a platform to showcase what they can do. Everybody's not one and done, but some of these guys are really talented, and they play with a different sense of pride.
Well, I know that starting a league isn't easy. It's going to have its struggles, and I know you believe you'll get it done. We will follow your journey, and you are always welcome in this place called Primetime when there is news that meets your opinion. And let me tell you, you were right about LeBron. I have to give you your respect on that.
And you're going to have the highest rating of anybody in CNN ever.
Well, from your lips to the ratings god's ears. We'll see. As long as we're doing the job right, that's all we got to control. Thank you very much for being with us. I appreciate it, big man. That's all we're going to do. Hey, you're more than welcome, man. It's good talking to you. Happy 4th of July. Be well.
And follow JBA Facebook.
JBA Facebook.
Be good.
Got it. All right. New video coming in tonight. You know about the kids, right, in the cave in Thailand. They were found alive. Amazing. We still don't understand how they were able to exist for 10 days in these conditions. New video you're looking at. You see the kids have gotten those Mylar blankets that we're becoming so familiar with. Why do they need them? It's cold in that cave. They've been in there going on 2 weeks now. There's no light in that cave. They are blocked in by water. You take a look at your screen right now. This is what they're dealing with. This is why you keep hearing about the water. How can they get the camera in there, but they can't get the kids out? This is why. You have to swim through these very loose, unstable, dark, tight spaces to get out. So you have to deal with the next aspect, which is, right now they're pumping like crazy. Why? Why so frantically? We're showing you the effort right now. Because it's monsoon season. More water is coming. And I don't know where you're watching me from right now, but monsoon season means feet of water can pool in no time. And this is an unstable place that they're in. So let's get some perspective about how big this challenge is. We have Paul Sumner, rescue dive instructor, more than 30 years experience. He's been in these kinds of situations. He knows what we're dealing with. Paul, thank you very much. We were talking before we started the segment. Amazing that they were found alive in those conditions. Yes. They all seem to be intact and well. But boy, do they have some challenges in their way. What do you see?
Most certainly, Chris. As not only a rescue dive instructor, but as a cave dive, I'm a trained cave diver as well. To put this in perspective, they're going to, if they do what the Navy SEALs are attempting to do, you're going to take kids and an adult that have never ever been on scuba before. So let's put that at a 0 on a scale of 0 to 100, and take them to a cave dive, a very advanced, very technical training curriculum that takes hundreds of hours of training before you're even allowed by international cave dive standards to even begin training. And you're going to take and then put them in gear that's totally unfamiliar with them, put them in, as you said, tight passages. If this water is as muddy as I would expect it to be, they're probably not going to have any visibility. So they're going to rely completely on contact with the divers that are trying to get them out of that.
So let's explain that, because that's the piece that matters most right now. And also, I don't want to project problems. So we'll take it one step at a time. While we're talking, if you can, Ellie and Mel, our director and REP, put up that graphic again of that little kind of, that network of different pathways they have to go through. And Paul, just give us this idea, please, of how are they going to do it with these kids? You have a mask with you that you want people to see. What is their best bet of how to get kids through 100 feet of a space like that if they don't know what they're doing?
First, they've got no training. Now, it appears that the Navy divers are going to utilize, or planning on utilizing something like this full face mask. Now, the advantage with this is it tends to fit a number of different size faces. And depending on the system they're utilizing, they may have communications in it which will help allay some of the anxiety of these kids, because they'll be able to talk to the other divers that are working to help them. But again, does this mask fit their face? And how comfortable will they be with completely new gear? I suspect they will probably spend quite a bit of time, even before they put these kids beneath the surface of the water, to see if, in fact, they're comfortable with this.
And all along, they're living in terrible conditions of darkness, of cold. They have food. They're getting some drugs antibiotics and stuff for kids who had some rashes, but they are up against it. Paul, let's do this. When we learn more and it becomes more imminent, please come back on the show so you can help people understand what it's going to take to get these kids out alive. It was a miracle that they found them, but they're going to need another one to get them out. So please, sir, we need your expertise and appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right. Thank you to Paul Sumner. All right, we're going to turn to another important and also emotional story ahead on Primetime. One of the mothers torn apart from her kids, 3 of them at the border, finally reunited with them today. Now, you've been following her lawyer's efforts on the show. We have them on often. We have a major update, and we've been following the story of Yenny, a Guatemalan mother separated from her 3 kids at the border. We've had her lawyer on a couple of times to explain the case because it's so representative of what so many are dealing with. Today, we have good news to report. After 45 days, Yenny got to see her kids, and she says they're okay. They all collapsed on the floor when they saw each other, hugging and crying. They're young, and they weren't sure if they were going to see their mother anytime soon. And that is a good moment, but I can't tell you that this is a happy ending. So hear the story from Yenny Gonzalez herself and her attorney, Jose Orochena. So let's get a sense. This must be so hard for you today. So the most obvious question is, how are your kids doing? ¿Cómo son sus hijos? How are they?
¿Cómo están?
Los encontré en buenas condiciones, gracias a Dios.
I found them in good conditions, thank God.
Que eso era lo que le pedí a Dios, encontrarlos bien, que estuvieran en buenas condiciones.
That's what I asked God, to find them in good health, and that's what she found them today.
Dime sobre el oso. Tell me about the teddy bear.
Este me lo dio mi niño más grande que se llama Lester.
This my eldest son gave me. His name is Lester.
Él dice que durmió con él todas estas noches que no estaba conmigo. Él lo abrazaba en la noche y me dice, mamá, llévatelo, me dice, para mientras estamos juntos. Ahí lo abrazas tú.
So Lester gave that to her because he had been sleeping with that teddy bear since he arrived here. And so he wanted his mother to sleep with it tonight and hug it until they're finally all reunited.
Oh. For you, ¿cuál es la parte más difícil? What is the hardest part in this for you?
La parte más difícil fue cuando me los arrancaron de mis brazos, sin siquiera dejarme darles un abrazo de despedida. No permitieron ni que me despidiera de mis hijos.
She said the hardest part was when they ripped them from my arms. They didn't even give me the opportunity to say goodbye.
¿Cuándo es la próxima vez? When's the next time you can see them? La próxima vez es when? ¿Cuándo?
El jueves, primero Dios, lograré verlos.
¿Por cuánto tiempo?
No me dijeron.
So next Thursday, is
Next
it?
Thursday, only because tomorrow's 4th of July and the Cayuga Center is closed. These children do go to a foster home here in the city.
So 2 days she gets to see the kids. Have they given a promise of regularity that you'll be able to see them?
Thankfully, several elected officials, the governor has been involved, Congressman Espaillat has been involved, and so many people have been pulling for us, pulling strings for us, getting us the access. And thankfully, Cayuga has said that they will allow Mom regular access to the children throughout the week.
Now, she's making an asylum case.
Correct.
That she had to flee from Guatemala because of fear of safety for the children. How so?
Mom faced gang violence at home. Gang violence which she herself was a victim of. Gang violence of which her son was being recruited. Her son is 11 years old, still sleeps with a teddy bear. An 11-year-old kid is being recruited by gang members. That is not a situation in which an 11-year-old should be in. An 11-year-old should be worried about his math and science homework. Instead, he's facing gang violence, gang recruitments when he goes to school. That's not what Mom wants, and that's why she came here to the United States.
Did she try the legal way?
She doesn't have anybody to petition for her, if that's what you mean by the legal way. But she did. The ports of entry are flooded. That's not a viable situation for many immigrants coming to the United States.
What does she want the audience to know? ¿Qué quiere decir a otras personas ahora?
En primer lugar, a mis amigas del centro donde estaba detención del hoy, Estaba en el área 400.
First instance, I just want to the women who are in Eloy, section 400.
Ellas cuando me vine yo me despidieron muy triste y a la vez alegres porque yo había logrado salir.
When I was leaving, I was saying goodbye to them. Some of them were sad, some of them were happy that I was leaving.
Porque me dijeron, usted va a contar todo lo que nos ha pasado aquí, Jenny. Me dijeron, y allá habla por nosotras para que nosotras también logremos salir de acá, me dijeron.
She said, Jenny, you're going to be able to tell our stories. Please tell our stories about everything that's happened to us.
I know this is going to be long. The promise that we made to you from the show remains, which is it is our job to report on the situation and what happens. Every step of the way, we want to know.
Absolutely, Chris. Right. And you will get, I hope, good news that these 12 mothers who have now signed up with us will be released as soon as possible.
Jenny, gracias. Okay? Y mucha suerte.
Gracias, muchas gracias. Sí.
Thank you, Chris.
Counselor.
Thank you.
Gracias a ustedes también porque
es mi trabajo.
Ajá, me informaron que ustedes habían sido.
Thank you, Brooke. New glimmers of hope after a dozen days in the darkness. The lead starts right now. New video inside the cave where a group of boys have been trapped underground for 12 days now. Inside, there is a very risky race against time and rising floodwaters. Did the forecast for 2020 just get stormy? A surprise candidate signals a potential challenge to Trump. But seriously, Stormy Daniels' attorney is here to explain his decision. Plus, just 2 weeks before President Trump sits down with Vladimir Putin, authorities in the UK declare a new major incident. Is there a link between this and Russia's deadly poisoning of a former spy? And welcome to The Lead. I'm Jim Sciutto, in again today for Jake on this 4th of July. A very happy Independence Day to you. We begin with our world lead, rescue workers racing against the clock and against the tide. Kushner studio with a new and different look at the rescue efforts. Tom, it's been hard, I think, for all of us to visualize just how deep inside this system they are. So help us understand.
Well, if diving them out is the solution, it is still fraught with danger precisely for that reason, Jim. Let's bring in the mountain and take a look at what we're talking about here. The latest updated numbers we have from the Thai Navy SEALs is that the distance that they are into the mountain from the entrance is about 2.5 miles, and they're more than a half mile down. Now, we don't have any detailed pictures of the inside of this cave, but if we brought up a hypothetical diagram here, you can see why this is such a problem. Because, yes, some parts of the cave have become completely flooded so that they are impassable at this moment. You'd have to bring them out past those points. We don't know how many there are. Are they as big as a house, big as a football field? We don't know. But we know they're there. And some of the divers say, this is really critical, that in some places the opening is only about as big as a single human being. So something like that, even if you're being generous. Now imagine trying to go through there with almost no visibility in rushing water in the cold while hauling someone behind you for an indeterminate amount of time underwater. That's why they're so worried about the idea of someone panicking and endangering the person being rescued and possibly the rescuer too, Jim.
Okay, so clearly that's a dangerous option. I mean, are there other realistic options in play if you're not diving out through those waters?
Well, a moment ago, you heard the talk about the idea of coming in from the top. That has worked. Back in 2010 in Chile, when those miners were captured there, we saw exactly that. They bored in with 3 different holes. One of them eventually reached these people down below, and you had these remarkable scenes of reunion as they were rescued through that hole. But you run the risk of causing another collapse, missing your target altogether. And remember, what we showed you a moment ago has nothing to do with the scale here. If you want a real sense of how deep in the ground these kids are, if you were sitting with them right now, to reach the sunlight, you would have to go up the length of 2 Empire State Buildings. That's why this is so hard. And that's why they're so excited about the possibility that maybe there are some undiscovered natural passages that might lead them to these kids and bring them out. They haven't found them yet, but that's why they're looking, Jim.
Those poor kids, those poor parents. Tom Foreman, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Joining us now on the phone is cave rescue expert Anwar Mirza. He's with the National Cave Rescue Commission. Thanks for joining us. I know that you said that diving out for these children is actually the most dangerous option in your view. Why is that?
Well, as many of your commentators have already noted, that you're going through very tight passages, you're going into depths, you're going through swift water.
Welcome back. In our politics lead, did the president just get a new challenger for 2020? Stormy Daniels' lawyer, Michael Avenatti, may have just tossed his hat into the ring, tweeting today, quote, "If big, he seeks re-election, I will run, but only if I think there is no other candidate in the race that has a real chance at beating him. We can't relive 2016. I love this country, our values, and our people too much to sit by while they are destroyed. Hashtag Fight Club, hashtag Basta." Joining me now live is the man himself, Michael Avenatti. Thanks so much for taking time on this July 4th.
Happy July 4th, Jim. Thanks for having me.
So I'm going to start very basic question. Why would you be qualified to be president?
Well, I think I'd be qualified because I have three things that this president lacks, Jim. Brains, heart, and courage. And I think I have those in spades compared to this president. And I am deeply disturbed at the direction that this country is taking. I'm deeply disturbed by what's happened most recently with separating these mothers and their children. I think it shows a complete lack of compassion. I'm deeply disturbed about our place in the world. I think our allies are very, very concerned about where America stands. I'm deeply concerned about these trade issues that the president has taken on, and I think ultimately are going to cost American jobs. And generally speaking, I love this country, and I'm very concerned about where we're going.
Fair points, and all due respect, but keep in mind on all these issues, you would be joining a race that has, well, at least not officially declared, but a number of U.S. senators and governors who are putatively throwing their hats into the ring. How would you measure up against them in light of the issues you're talking about? If you're talking about international trade issues, the national security threats facing this country today, how would you make a credible case to voters that you should be the commander-in-chief?
Jim, all of the experience in the world isn't going to be worth anything if you can't beat this guy. And I'll tell you this, I think that Donald Trump is an exceptional campaigner. I think he has very good political instincts, and I think he should not be underestimated. And if you want to know how he stacks up against traditional politicians with long track records and long voting records, all you have to do is look at the 15, that's not one, that's not two, 15 candidates that he beat on his run to the White House. The bottom line is there's two questions. Number one, who can beat this guy? And number two, will they be better than he is if they are elected? Those are the only two questions, in my view, that matter.
Let me ask you this, because I want to read a tweet of your own, and this just from Sunday. So 3 days ago, you said the following then: "I am extremely flattered by the suggestions that I attempt to become AG, that is Attorney General, or run for the House or Senate, but I have zero interest in those jobs, none. I don't want to become a career politician. We have too many as it is." It's quite a change in 72 hours. What led to the change?
No, it's not a change. I didn't say that I wasn't going to challenge the president for the presidency of the United States. Bottom line here, Jim, is if he is reelected, this country is in a world of hurt, in a very, very bad place. People are upset about the potential that he's going to nominate a Supreme Court justice to replace Justice Kennedy. Well, let me tell you something. The next president of the United States, whoever serves after 2020, likely will have a chance to appoint 2, if not 3 additional Supreme Court justices. That is a big deal for the future of this country.
No question. Well, I want to turn now to a case, of course, you're familiar with, involved in, and one involving a Mr. Michael Cohen. You may have noticed today that he deleted his biography from his Twitter profile, which used to read, "Personal attorney to President Donald Trump." That is no longer there. You had some comments earlier in the week with him seeming to distance himself from the president. In your view, is he indicating that he'd be willing to cooperate with prosecutors, perhaps against the president, or, as a lawyer, do you see him throwing up a trial balloon for a pardon from the president?
Well, I think, frankly, he's playing games with the American people, Jim. You know, there's nothing stopping Michael Cohen from being a patriot and coming forward with what he knows now about the president. He does not have to wait for charges to be filed. He does not have to wait to be indicted. And I think what he's trying to do is he's trying to be half pregnant, if you will. He wants the support of the American people, but he doesn't want to distance himself too much from the president. And you can't be a fence rider in this situation. He either needs to step up or step out.
Right, and tell the truth to those prosecutors.
Correct.
Turning to another topic, we were speaking about the possibility of running for president. Of course, you would know, a presidential run, any political run, you would face a lot of scrutiny. Bankruptcy records, as you know, show that your former law firm owed the IRS about $2.4 million in back taxes, penalties, interest. That still, those records show, has not been paid off. Can you run for president without settling that issue?
Well, Jim, we expect that issue to be fully settled shortly. I don't owe anything personally. You know, look, I'll be happy to put my tax records and my background up against the president's background and his tax records. Of course, he won't release any of that information. I don't know how many times he filed for bankruptcy. I've never filed for bankruptcy personally, but I am interested in talking about ripping kids from the sides of their mothers. I am interested in having allies laugh at us around the world. I am interested in where all those jobs are that he promised Americans in key electoral states. I am interested in pro-choice and a whole host of other issues. So look, I hope somebody that's competent enough to beat this guy, and that's the question, who can beat him? I hope that person steps forward. If they don't, I will.
Well, you've already learned the art of the good pivot there. So Michael Avenatti, thank you for coming on, and sincerely wish you a happy 4th of July.
Same to you, Jim. Thanks.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Well, we have this breaking news just into CNN. Liberty Island in New York City is being evacuated now because of a person trying to climb the Statue of Liberty. You're looking at a live picture there now of the statue, and joining me live is CNN's Bryn Gingras from New York. Bryn, what are we learning from police? How far up the statue? Do we have any idea who this person is?
Yeah, Jim, you know, this happened a little bit earlier today. There was actually a total of 8 people that were in protest at one point holding up a huge sign that said abolish ICE. It was a total of 8 people. 7 of those people are already under arrest. But now as you look at this video, you can see in the corner of that green section, the base of the Statue of Liberty is one person holding some sort of sign, and at a little bit lower than them, all those heads you see there, that is NYPD personnel. Specifically the emergency services unit. We have 3 different units, I'm told, on the scene, and those are those highly trained tactical units that are working to get that 8th person down, who we're told is a woman who was part of this protest. And I would imagine at this point, I'm trying to get this confirmed, I would imagine the hostage negotiation team would be a part of this. Those are the people that are skilled to sort of talk to people to get them to come down in situations like this, like a protest. So I wish I could answer to you, and we can find that out certainly, the base to where this person is, how far above ground we're talking here. But it's a pretty significant climb that this person has made already. Again, 7 people already climbed a bit of the Statue of Liberty in their protest, holding up this sign, and then this 8th person went even further. As you already mentioned, Jim, the Liberty Island has been evacuated. I mean, this is a huge section, of course, of the harbor here in New York City where the Statue of Liberty sits. Huge tourist area, especially when it's the 4th of July. So this is a big deal. We know there are harbor units as well right around the Statue of Liberty, but a lot of personnel there on the scene trying to get this 8th person either to come down or probably at this point trying to figure out how they're going to get up there and arrest this 8th person, Jim.
Bryn Gingras, thank you very much. And there you have it. This is a protest on July 4th at the Statue of Liberty, which with a poem which reads in part, "Give us your tired and poor," and that protest about immigration, ICE, family separation, etc. I want to bring in Phil Mudd, who, of course, worked in counterterrorism for the FBI and the CIA. You know New York City very well. How seriously would police and authorities approach a situation like this there, particularly on a holiday? A number of the members of the public would be visiting the statue as well.
Look, if you're a member of the public, you step back and say, this is a protest that fits in the context of what we've seen in the United States for the past week or two. As a counterterrorism professional, you can't make that assumption. Assumptions will kill you. Right. There's a couple of characteristics you look at in this case. We have not only one person, multiple people. The first is an immediate question. What do they have on their persons? What do they bring onto the island? Do they bring anything on that's a threat to the people around the island? Obviously, you have a question about when you're going to get access to the person up on the monument. Are there other individuals beyond the immediate circle who are involved in this? And then there's a secondary question. I'm sure the investigators will spend the afternoon taking off July 4th to investigate intent. What were they trying to do? How can we reassure ourselves of one of the toughest things in the intelligence business, that is the negative? How can we be guaranteed that they didn't intend to do harm to anybody? So it looks like a protest. I, as now a member of the public for the past 8 years, would say it's a protest. You can't make that assumption if you're an investigator.
If you're just joining us now, you're looking at live pictures of the Statue of Liberty in New York. This, the lower portion there's a wider shot. Liberty Island has been closed down. A number of people, it appears, have climbed the base of the statue on this July 4th. Our reporter in New York saying that it appears to be a protest related to ICE, immigration, etc. But Phil Mudd, our CNN terrorism and national security analyst, you're saying that the authorities are not going to eliminate any possibility here. They want to have an abundance of caution to make sure there aren't any other ill intents.
Sure. I mean, in the 17 years post 9/11, I realize this has no sort of bearing on post 9/11. It doesn't look like a terrorist attack. You go into these situations saying, how can we be reassured that the individuals involved in this don't have something like a backpack device? I doubt they do. But again, there's a big difference between what you think and what you know. Being reassured over the course of hours that there's nothing they carried on that island that doesn't threaten an individual, that's tough to do. And in the meantime, you can't look around and say, we're just going to take a risk that these people are benign, that they say they're benign. In the meantime, you've got to disrupt the vacation plans of all the people on the island and say, we've got to figure out what we've got our hands on here. It's going to take a little while.
Well, we should say that it is our information at this point. No evidence of terrorism, but of course, necessary to exercise an abundance of caution there. Thanks very much to Phil Mudd. We're going to keep an eye on this breaking news story that's developing right now. And as we do, you can see there now what appears to be one of the protesters, and I believe on the left there, a police officer who's climbed up. You can see the ladder there on the left that the officer appears to have used. One of the protesters there kind of sitting, looking kind of relaxed, like they're not in any sort of rush to get off there. Bryn Gingras joining us back again from New York. You're learning new details.
Yeah, Jim, I'm learning from sources there who are familiar with this situation, with the scene, that what officers have to do is build a rope rescue system. So they're not going to wait to try to coax this person down at this point. They're actually going to build some sort of system that will get officers to their level and then make that arrest. And then what I'm learning is after that arrest is made or after they are detained, so you're seeing those officers sort of build this contraption. I know it looks like a ladder, but you see this other officer that's sort of at the base there at the green point. This is like, I guess, the rope rescue system that they're going to have to build to actually put this person in custody. And then what they'll do typically is almost piggyback them or have them in handcuffs and lead them down safely. What I'm told then from there is this person will be taken on a boat. As I told you, Hudson, or the water unit, harbor unit of the NYPD is there. They're going to put this person on that boat and bring them directly to most likely the Staten Island ferry terminal on the Manhattan side to put them under arrest.
Okay.
So you can see this person. Yeah, go ahead.
Bryn, as we're watching here, it is one protester who's there. I know there was some talk of maybe there were multiple. To our knowledge, there's one person, and the initial indications are that this is a protest. How do we know that?
Well, earlier today, about 3:15 is when NYPD got this initial call. There was a total of 8 protesters who were holding up a sign that said "Abolish ICE."
Okay.
7 arrests were made. This one other person climbed further. So that's who officers are worried about getting at this point down to safety and then making the 8th arrest. So there was a total of 8, but this is the final one that they have to put under arrest once they safely can get to her.
I get it. So you're seeing there, in effect, as Bryn was explaining, the final remaining protester. There were a number there before. They released a banner talking about abolishing ICE, that is the immigration service that's been so involved in these immigration issues, arrests, deportations, etc. Now the police, they're setting up a device to safely get the final protester down. We're going to keep We're going to keep an eye on this story going forward. I'll just go back to Phil now. So based on what we heard there, so you've got a final protester, it appears, and seems like the focus now, Phil, is getting that person off there safely, right? Especially if they don't want to come down.
Not quite yet. There's a couple focuses here. I'm not going to assume that's the final protester. When I go into that conversation, or when the NYPD goes into a conversation with the group that's there, the first immediate question is, you've got a criminal event. You've got to potentially talk to them about what they were thinking about going into this. But my first question would be, are you part of a group that's planning something broader across New York City? You can't guarantee that today or tomorrow or next week that they haven't thought about further protests that would disrupt life in New York City. So it's not just resolving what happened at Liberty Island. It's figuring out if something else is afoot here.
Understood. Abundance of caution, always important. We're going to continue to follow this story. We're going to take a short break now. More details on this unfolding story when we come back. We're back now with the breaking news that we are following live. This is a live picture of the Statue of Liberty on the 4th of July. A protester has climbed up to the base there. You can see that about the center of the screen. Those figures on the left side, those are police officers who are developing some sort of system of ladders and ropes to evacuate that protester. Liberty Island, which surrounds the Statue of Liberty, has already been evacuated of the many tourists and visitors who've been there today on the July 4th holiday. CNN's Bryn Gingras, she's been following this story from New York. Bryn, I understand you have new details.
More,
Hi, Bryn, do you hear Jim?
Jim, can you hear me?
I hear you now. So tell us what's the latest you're learning.
Yeah, we're learning that NYPD hostage negotiators are now headed to the scene, trying to coax this person. Hopefully that maybe the emergency services unit there is doing
She
a
looks
good
to
job
be
of
reaching
coaxing.
over now.
Right.
Oh, she maybe even grabbing their hand. Oh no, she took some water. It looks like she took a bottle of water.
Okay, took some
a
water.
bottle of water from the officer.
Right. So these on the scene, what you're looking at right now, are emergency service unit officers. These are these highly trained tactical officers. They respond to suicide jumpers on bridges. I mean, these guys are incredibly well equipped to handle these situations, and again, highly trained. So what that person is likely doing is talking to this person, trying to get them to connect with them so they can get this person down to safety. But as I said, in addition to that, we know that hostage negotiation teams are headed there as well, and those people are specifically trained, obviously, to talk to these people out of these situations to get this person down. But these, again, ESU members, what they're doing, I'm told through a source, is they're building a system of pulleys, of ropes. You can see the ladder there, but you can also see that the officers really don't have great access to this person. So they're right now constructing, I'm told, a ladder system, a pulley system that they can get more officers up there and probably closer to this person in order to get them down to safety. Because as we've been witnessing, as officers get a little bit closer, this person sort of makes her way or his way,
right.
We think it's a woman, makes her way around the Statue of Liberty. So that's why officers aren't going further up there, if you can imagine how risky this is for them right now as well. So that's all underway right now as they continue to work on the situation that's been going on for about an hour and 15 minutes, Jim.
It also looks like, Bryn, and I know that, as you said, there's no hostage here, but a negotiator
Correct.
might be involved. It looks like the officer closest to the protester is conversing with her, has just given her a bottle of water. I mean, I assume that's part of the process to kind of establish contact so that you can get some trust and maybe get her safely. And it's great that we're pulling out now, because you see that there's a lot of distance you can fall if things don't go well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and that's a good vantage point there as well, because it shows you how clear Liberty Island is, which you can imagine wouldn't be that clear on a day like today, Independence Day. It's usually packed with tourists, but it has been evacuated. But yes, those people are trained to have these conversations, and yes, no hostage, but they deal with people who are suicidal. In this case, it seems to be a protester. So they're trained, but again, the hostage negotiation team, they are even more trained in these situations. So that's really more just reinforcement that's on its way to help these ESU officers try to get her down.
We have Phil Mudd here as well, who longtime CIA and also FBI, works in counterterrorism. But as you look at this unfold here now, how difficult is it to resolve something like this? I mean, clearly for the protester, and if you're just joining us now, earlier in the day, this person was joined by 7 or 8 others, and they unfurled a banner talking about abolishing ICE. The agency deals with a lot of enforcement of the immigration laws. So a protest on July 4th at the Statue of Liberty. I imagine the protester wants to keep the attention of the world on themselves, so does not have an incentive to get off quickly. So how do you resolve something like this?
Well, there's a couple things going on here. Look, excuse me, stepping back, if you look at the video, you know why it's difficult to resolve this. This is going to be resolved peacefully. The question is about the safety of the officers and the individual involved. If you're at ground level here, you could resolve this now. But despite the frustration with this individual, you can't afford to risk their life or their health, so they're going to sit there and be very cautious. The secondary issue that's going to take hours to resolve is I got to go back to my old life and say I need some identification here because that is a name, because I want to know things like social media profile, what this person has said in the past. I mentioned a moment ago. Does that give me an indication about whether they're part of a group, whether they're planning something further? This issue is going to be resolved quickly. My question would be, is there a secondary issue with some affiliated group that we're going to see later today or tomorrow or something? I doubt it, but you can't believe that until you prove it.
Sure. Well, we're going to continue to monitor the breaking news here. There is Liberty Island on July 4th, closed off to visitors, a protester there, police negotiating with that protester, trying to get them down safely. We will bring you any updates as they happen. We're going to turn now to our politics lead. We're learning today that President Trump raised the possibility with senior advisors of invading Venezuela. That's right, invading a sovereign Latin American nation. This during a meeting with his senior most foreign policy advisors last summer. He then floated the idea to Latin American leaders during the UN General Assembly. CNN's Caitlin Collins, she has been following the story. She picks up our coverage from the White House today.
President Trump stunning top aides when he suggested invading Venezuela during a closed-door meeting. Sources telling CNN Trump raised the idea last summer while discussing diplomatic sanctions. Dumbfounded aides quickly explaining how the idea could backfire. But Trump continued to push it in the following days, refusing to take military action off the table.
We have many options for Venezuela. And by the way, I'm not going to rule out a military option.
Back at the White House, Trump weighing his options to replace Justice Anthony Kennedy on the Supreme Court as he closes in on his pick.
I've spent the last 3 days interviewing and thinking about Supreme Court justices, and I think you'll be very impressed.
Sources telling CNN he's expected to make a final decision tomorrow or Friday after interviewing 7 potential nominees this week.
We hit a home run there, and we're going to hit a home run here.
On the short list, 2 candidates who are now getting backlash from critics, facing claims one isn't conservative enough, while the other is too far to the right. Brett Kavanaugh is one of those 2, a federal appeals court judge favored by White House counsel Don McGahn, facing skepticism from social conservatives for his votes on health care and ties to the Bush White House.
Sir, thank you for the privilege of working here, and thank you for the honor of nominating me to the court.
Judge Amy Coney Barrett is the other. If nominated, she would be the first woman put on the Supreme Court by a Republican president since 1981.
I will send to the Senate the nomination of Judge Sandra Day O'Connor.
She faces a tough confirmation battle from Democrats, who say her Catholic faith plays too big a role in her view of the law.
You have a long history of believing that your religious beliefs should prevail. The dogma lives loudly within you.
Now, Jim, there are 5 days to go before the president's self-imposed deadline of when he's going to announce that Supreme Court pick. He spent today at his golf course outside of Washington before participating in a 4th of July celebration event here at the White House tonight. He's been on the phone all day as this 11th hour lobbying effort is underway to sway the president's pick. Jim?
Caitlin Collins there at the White House. So, back with our panel now. Jack Kingston, invading Venezuela?
Probably not a good idea. I do think, you know, at the time that there were a lot of human trafficking issues, there were drug issues, there were human rights violations, there was starvation, there was a recall petition on Maddow, and so I think there was a lot of chaos down there. But under the theory that if your enemy is killing himself, why do it for him? You know, maybe not necessarily the way the expression goes, but I think that Venezuela was imploding. And it worries me that maybe we got Maddow reelected by being the outside threat because he was able to use that to his advantage.
And that was the concern at the time. When you'll remember, the president didn't say invade Venezuela, but he did leave the option of military options on the table. Chris Cillizza, when the president does this, is he seriously considering it, or is it a bit of an exercise to show the power that he has, or leave Latin American neighbors on edge?
Can I take all of those as an option? Is there a D, all of the above? The short answer is I don't really know. I do think it is important to remember two things as relates to Donald Trump, particularly on foreign policy. He is someone who came to this office with zero background in it. Zero. And he is also someone who pledged repeatedly to much success to think differently about literally everything.
But also panned many U.S. foreign engagements, including the invasion of Iraq.
I think he is not bound by the congressman's sort of that you get into a hornet's nest if you do that. I think he throws a lot of things out. I don't know how seriously you take them, because the truth of the matter is, when he throws something out that you think is just a throwaway line, sometimes it's not. And that's what's so hard to know. How serious is he about any of these things that he suggests
And
regularly?
particularly for the Venezuelans or and Latin Americans. Now, in America, we might say, well, it doesn't really mean that much.
He's a lot for them.
But down there, it means a heck of a lot.
Come on, like, guys, really, when the President of the United States muses aloud to a bunch of folks and then shares it with foreign leaders that, you know what, I might just use my military to invade a country. That's not just a sort of like this, you know, casual thing. That's completely reckless.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree. At the same time, I know you can find clips of me saying, I don't think saying my nuclear button is bigger than yours is going to lead to any good end in North Korea. It still might not, for sure. At the same time, I would not have predicted that day. Yeah, they'll probably sit down for a summit in Singapore. So you're right. I think the casualness with which he suggests things is not the casualness with which it should be or is received. At the same time, sometimes the unorthodoxy does things that I will candidly admit I never thought would ever be the result of it.
Phil, how do U.S. allies react to this kind of thing? Because it's certainly not isolated. You had the president in the last week threatened to withdraw troops from Europe in a budget spat with NATO. Say, let's take the U.S. troops out of Germany who have been there since World War II, right? I mean, unsettling, to say the least, for allies.
Yeah, I think there's two ways to look at this. I mean, I agree with Jack. The first way is sort of humorously. It's July 4th. You're looking at it saying, are you kidding me? I mean, this is not going to happen. But there is a different perspective that's more serious. In the wake of the president's sort of getting sideways with the Canadians, what he said about NATO, his flip on initially telling former Secretary of State Tillerson, we ain't talking to the North Koreans, and then showing up in Singapore. You look at this and say, as we get into Iran negotiations on nuclear, as we deal with North Korea, if you're an ally looking at this saying, I'm not sure where this guy is going to come out. The final point I'd say, Jim, is there has never been a time in my memory where cabinet members aren't more important. Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, they got to walk in, and the stories say they did in this case, and say, Mr. President, you're there to upset the apple cart, but we're not going into an invasion.
But he has to listen.
Sorry, where is H.R. McMaster now?
Yeah, it's finito.
None of them who were in that meeting are still there. It's dangerous for our allies. Look at what's happening. He's embracing Putin again, and with another meeting. And our allies are stuck in the middle of our trade war. They have no idea which way to go. And so we are isolating ourselves increasingly. That might not matter to us this year, but it is going to matter to us a lot over the course of the next several years. When America gets in trouble, these guys are not going to come running for us.
Let me quickly turn, because you heard me speaking to Michael Avenatti, of course, Stormy Daniels' lawyer earlier, who says he's running for president. I mean, he was even laying out via Twitter this afternoon something of a platform. He would not appoint justices who would overturn Roe v. Wade. Serious candidate?
Okay, so in years past, I would say simply being on television a lot is not necessarily that getting a lot of attention on cable TV doesn't necessarily equate to it. I still think it is extremely unlikely that someone with Michael Avenatti's profile who has come to the public eye as a porn star's lawyer. Now, I've said they should pay him unlimited amounts of money for the attention he has drawn to this case. That doesn't mean he needs to be president. At the same time, again, I've been wrong enough about Donald Trump.
This is clearly cable TV disease. Like, this is what cable TV is.
People are coming up to me and saying,
we don't work for cable TV, but this is what cable TV is.
I tell Shiro to run for president all the time.
Right, it's like,
my mom
you're on TV.
But let me say, Sarah Palin made a heck of a lot of money in the post-political career of doing the TV lecture circuit to the red meat crowd. I think he's got a niche. I think he's going to sell books.
Are you saying that people do stuff in Washington just to make money?
Shockingly. Shockingly. But I don't know what, he said, I'm running on three things: heart, brains, and courage. And, I want to know what that does for the jobs and the tax.
Democrats are not going to nominate somebody else who is not qualified to be.
He might have said the same thing about the Republicans and Donald Trump a few years ago. But anyway, I won't call you on that. Thanks very much to the panel. We are following breaking news. A protester has climbed the Statue of Liberty, forcing the evacuation of Liberty Island. Police on the scene. You can see them there. They've been trying to coax the protester off there. She still has not left. We're going to be back with the latest in just a moment. Who has often chased down allegations against others in other parties without perhaps giving them the time to wait and give their version of the story. I mean, listen, in any investigation, that's what you should do.
Right.
But he has not always followed those rules himself.
He has been a particularly strident congressman, to say the least, obviously a member of the Freedom Caucus when it comes to investigating typically members of the Democratic Party. But I do agree with Alice. We do have to be very careful with these situations to wait to hear everything before we make a judgment. Obviously, we might meet that critical mass when you have 3 and 4 people coming out. We only really have one that's out, at least on the air in the public, saying that he knew about this in real time contemporaneously. But with these types of stories, I think it is important to not only remember that, but that he is in fact not the, he would be someone who would be accused of facilitating, but obviously not the accused.
Absolutely, and that's something we said on the air repeatedly yesterday when we first reported the stories. Let's be clear, this is about a sin of omission. No one should mistake at home that he's accused of any abuse. Alice,
and we've had today, and since this story first came out, was first reported, we have had several people that have known Jim Jordan for many, many years who have come out and say he would not have turned a blind eye to this, and I trust his credibility, and he is a man of honor and integrity. And those kind of stories, my understanding from his office, will continue to come out standing up for him, and it will be interesting to see how this plays out. But so far, we've really just heard a lot from one side, and now he is having the opportunity to put it out.
Politically, this is a lot like the Elizabeth Etsy story, where you have, she's not the perpetrator, but the accusation that you allowed bad behavior to happen.
Which if you go back to the case of Joe Paterno, etc., I mean,
that is not. But Alice, two things. As a communications professional, I'm just curious, his handling of this so far, he's known about this, as Jim was pointing out, for months. I guess I'm a little surprised for such a pro on Capitol Hill didn't get out ahead of this in some way and is now responding this way. Would you have advised differently in that? Or
I think my understanding, talking with the office yesterday as well as this morning, they provided a lot more information to the original news outlet that put the story out that was not included in the story. So I think we have to take that into consideration. Since this has come out, they have done a good job, in my view, of pushing back and getting other stories and sources out there with information. I think it was good with the congressman being in his district, speaking to the press, didn't hold anything back and let them ask questions until they were done. I think that's important. But at this stage of the game, yes, full disclosure, answer any and all questions, I think is important. But, getting out ahead of it.
Getting out ahead of it, too, is a little dangerous because it outs you. I mean, it gets you involved in a story that could become a scandal. So that's always a risky
one incentive might be you don't want the story to come out. But listen, it's early in this investigation. What we're going to do as a network certainly is follow up, but we can't make any conclusions. Stand by, everyone. There's a lot of other news. The 4th of July fireworks in Washington that could potentially include a firing at the White House. A senior administration official tells CNN that EPA Chief Scott Pruitt is, quote, inching forward to the tipping point. Pruitt is facing right now more than a dozen federal probes, if you can believe it, into his actions. And it was revealed this week that his staff kept a secret schedule to hide meetings from the public that might potentially embarrass Pruitt. CNN senior White House correspondent Jeff Zeleny at the White House today. Jeff, the president to this point has expressed a lot of confidence in Pruitt, but now you're learning that he may be running out of patience.
Well, Jim, it certainly seems at this point the voices from all sides, from conservatives, from Republicans on the Hill, even from some former supporters of Scott Pruitt, is that time is up, that he is a big distraction for this White House. We have seen the president fire cabinet secretary after cabinet secretary, other aides and advisors dismissing them. Scott Pruitt, for some reason, has had repeated opportunities to stay on board despite all these investigations. But we are learning interesting information that it was Scott Pruitt himself who in the spring tried to go to the president to offer an exit strategy, if you will, to be the acting attorney general to replace Jeff Sessions temporarily. The president didn't take him up on that, but we are also learning that a senior administration official says they believe this is at a tipping point with the president. He knows that all of these investigations are swirling around. Jim, the question we've all had is, how has Scott Pruitt survived this long? The answer to that question comes because oil and gas donors and other major contributors and friends of this administration have been happy with the policies of the EPA. They've urged the president to not fire him up until this point. But we do get a sense that the president likely losing his patience. But of course, many people thought that months ago, Jim, so we'll have to wait and see when the president makes this a decision himself. But no question, Scott Pruitt at the EPA has been the biggest black eye on the president's cabinet.
It has, but as you say, it's given the president a lot of what he's wanted. Certainly industry, you have in effect, a champion of the energy industry who's running the agencies as opposed to kind of keep them in check. Other news, the president, of course, upcoming announcement on potential Supreme Court nominees. You've learned more about the White House strategy on the pick.
We have indeed. I mean, the president is out at his golf course not far from the White House here in Virginia, possibly a sign that he is essentially done with this decision phase of the Supreme Court pick. We know he's had 7 possible contenders in for interviews, and we do know, I am told by people familiar with the process, he's likely to make up his mind either tomorrow or Friday. And that is to give people who are working in this newly minted war room here at the White House time to sort of get ready for the onslaught and a bruising summer confirmation fight. Now, the president, I'm told, is going to keep this decision essentially under wraps, with the exception of telling a couple people, but there are going to be 2 or 3 possible people also on the list who this team is going to get ready for that announcement on Monday. So they hope it will not leak out, because there will essentially be a list of either 2 or 3 finalists. But Jim, no question at all that there is an ongoing lobbying effort, an 11th hour lobbying push. We have senators who are calling the president, other conservative activists calling the president, trying to make their choice. Essentially, it boils down to religious conservatives and social conservatives who really have that as their top issue, versus legal conservatives who believe that it's better to appoint a justice who believes in the rule of law and principle of law and does not want extensive government regulation. So these 2 sort of defining pillars of the Republican Party now at odds here as the president makes his choice, but we do think he's only hours away from doing that. Of course, he'll announce it on Monday night. Jim?
And with real issues hanging in the balance, Roe v. Wade among them. Jeff Zeleny at the White House, thanks very much. Panel's back with me now. So David, Scott Pruitt has done what the president, what certainly the energy lobby wants, maybe even above and beyond the call of duty here, but presumably the president could get another loyalist who could carry that out. I mean, why does the president stick with Scott Pruitt through what are embarrassing scandals in a midterm election year?
He hasn't revealed that to us. We don't know the answer to the question as to why, but I think we know enough about President Trump's sort of outlook on these kinds of moments to have insight into what might be going on here. I think the president has a ton of respect for taking all that incoming and standing strong and surviving it. I think he sees a little bit of himself in that. So I think that has some appeal, to not give in and cave to your critics. And as you mentioned, yes, other people could indeed implement and execute on the policy agenda, but Scott Pruitt is doing it quite effectively to the president's pleasure, and members of the cabinet serve at the pleasure. Now, as you know, the White House has said that perhaps they've reached a tipping point. The president himself has said in the past that he doesn't love all these headlines and stories. So I don't know that we have come to the final moment of Pruitt's fate in the Trump administration.
And to be clear, they're not just headlines and stories. I mean, they're clear breaches of ethics rules, and yet.
Although I think the president's probably more concerned about the headlines and the stories, but
no,
because he's very consumed by news coverage. But
I think both of you are right in that you don't have to go far in GOP circles in this town or anywhere to find someone who would be just as loyal to the president, who would be just as effective at the job, but without all these ethics violations. I was a big supporter of him at the beginning with regard to how strong he was enforcing the federal government regulations policies and the environmental and the Paris Accord. But one after the other of these issues coming out is quite a distraction. He's gotten to be the Walter Mitty of the White House. He's got a job that's not quite so jazzy, but then he has this secret life of secret calendars and luxury travel and soundproof rooms. And at some point, from a communication standpoint and a policy standpoint, I think this White House needs to say, all right, enough's enough. We reached a tipping point. We can't continue to say we're reviewing that, we're looking into it. At some point, they're going to have to do something.
So another man in the news, Michael Cohen. We took notice today, just about an hour ago, that Michael Cohen, you might have changed his profile on Twitter to take out the phrase personal attorney to President Donald J. Trump. That's how it appeared before on the left. This is how it appears now. Lauren, what's he trying to say there?
I think what he's trying to say...
We broke up via social media?
Yeah, it looks like he's inching closer and closer to being the guy that might flip. Obviously, the Stephanopoulos interview and now this, and the pronouncement of loyalty to family over everything else may indicate that we're seeing the closer... You know, he's in huge trouble, obviously, legally. He's going to have to save himself at some point. Whether that means flipping on Trump, we don't know. But, of course, Trump is sending every signal that he would probably throw a pardon. Right. So there's all that.
And there is this, I've spoken to a lot of lawyers who represented folks in dire legal circumstances who see Michael Cohen throwing his trial balloon up for a pardon as well. Thanks very much, Lauren, Alice, and David. Just in, a senior administration official is telling CNN that the president asked about the possibility, wait for this, of invading Venezuela during a meeting about sanctions against that country. We're going to have details on that story next. Plus, a bipartisan group of Senate investigators backing the intelligence community that Russia attacked the U.S. and wanted the president to win. So will President Trump finally acknowledge that assessment? Welcome back. And breaking news. CNN can now confirm that President Trump asked a number of his top foreign policy advisors last summer about the possibility of invading Venezuela. Trump aides vigorously pushed back against the idea, as did fellow Latin American leaders who allegedly told Trump they did not want to see a U.S. invasion. CNN White House reporter Jeremy Diamond joins us now with more on this. I remember this moment last summer when the president in public said that military options were on the table, and that was enough for some people to be taken aback, saying, what, military options for Venezuela? But here you have, I mean, even this is quite a military option, invasion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that was in Bedminster back in August. He was standing alongside UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, openly talking about the possibility of a military option, not taking it off the table as he was considering these additional sanctions. But the day before, the president was in a meeting with several of his top foreign policy advisors, including then National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, and he asked them about the possibility of invading Venezuela. He asked them whether that might be an option to consider. Now, let's be clear, the senior administration official who confirmed this to me emphasized that there were no imminent plans for any kind of a military strike on Venezuela and characterized this really as the president thinking out loud. But he didn't just do it one time. He was doing it with his advisors, talking about the possibility of a military invasion of Venezuela, and then he also probed several Latin American leaders about it in the subsequent month, both the Colombian president and Latin American leaders at the UN.
If you then take that idea to Latin American leaders, that sounds like the president was seriously considering this.
Yeah, it seems like he was at least doing some kind of a focus group session with these Latin American leaders about invading Venezuela, which would obviously be a serious escalation of the U.S. response. We know this administration has been tough on Venezuela, imposing numerous sanctions, but this, of course, would be taking it to a whole new level.
Jeremy Diamond, thanks very much. For more context on this, let's bring in CNN intelligence and security analyst. He's also a former CIA operative, Bob Baer. Bob, so the president, the White House is saying he was just thinking out loud here, but the president apparently took it seriously enough to go to other Latin American leaders and raise the idea of a U.S. invasion of Venezuela. You've been around government a while. How unusual is it for a president to raise that in this context?
Very unusual. It's very sensitive in South America, of course, Jim. U.S. troops operating there, overthrowing a government is, beyond the pale. Then again, Venezuela is a mess. Its oil production has fallen off a cliff. It's chaos. People aren't being fed. The countries around Venezuela they're scared. Let's put it this way. A lot of refugees coming across the border. And I do know that this has been in the air for a while, a couple of years, about a possible coup d'etat against Maduro, the head of the government in Venezuela. So the president has got wind of this. I understand that McMaster pushed back on this early on. Stay out of Venezuela. It's a mess. It looks like this has come back around, and the situation is ripe for a change there. So let's see where it goes.
Of course, McMaster is gone now, and we've seen a history of this president saying goodbye to advisors who challenge him, right, on some issues. Looking at this, you mentioned that this might have come from inside the country. You say, well, was the idea of this proposed to the U.S., perhaps, by factions inside Venezuela?
Well, the way it usually works is exiles living outside of Venezuela will get wind of this or claim to that generals want to move against Maduro. They'll try to transmit those messages to the President and the National Security Council. Whether, in fact, there's a movement underway to get rid of Maduro in Venezuela, nobody knows for sure, but there's certainly not a lot of noise about it. But it's public as well. But a lot of people would like to get to this president and say, you've got to do something about Venezuela. It's only going to get worse. It's going to destabilize the countries around it. And, he's listening, clearly.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about exiles encouraging an invasion. Think Ahmed Chalabi in Iraq. It's worked before.
Yeah, great.
Bob Baer, thanks very much.
Thanks. Happy 4th.
Coming up, breaking with the president. A Republican-led panel sides with the intelligence community's confident assessment that Russian President Vladimir Putin wanted Trump to win the 2016 election. I'll get reaction from Republican Congressman Tom Reed. That's just next. And later, trapped for another night. New video from inside a flooded cave where a youth soccer team waits to be rescued. Is learning to scuba dive going to be their only hope of getting out? Today, a Senate committee led by a Republican and with a majority of Republican members is breaking with the president, saying not only did Russia meddle in the 2016 election, but that the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, specifically wanted Donald Trump to win and to hurt Hillary Clinton. The new bipartisan findings from the Senate Intelligence Committee are in stark contrast to findings from Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee, which sided with the president and said that Putin did not try to help Trump win. Following all of this for us has been seen in political correspondent Sarah Murray. So Sarah, walk us through these findings, which were really, quite strongly worded. There was no wishy-washy in this. It was very direct.
Well, that's right. And remember, Jim, the intelligence community wasn't very wishy-washy on this when they put out their report in January of 2017. And what we see from the Senate report is they're concurring. They're saying that, yes, Russia did meddle in the 2016 election, and their preference was Donald Trump. They did it to try to benefit Trump. But the Senate committee also concludes they did this to try to hurt Hillary Clinton as well. And this was not something that was a one-off effort. This was something that was done under the direction of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, as the Senate was looking at how the intelligence community came to this assessment in January 2017, they decided that the intelligence community reached these conclusions in a professional and transparent manner. They said there didn't seem to be any political pressure for them to reach these conclusions, that when they disagreed about an issue, there was a debate about it, and it was transparent. So essentially, they're saying all these conclusions we saw from the intelligence community in 2017 that the president has doubted, they were sound.
So Senate Intel Investigation, of course, one of many intelligence agencies, have made their own confident assessments, and in fact over time have said that Russia's interference has been even greater than they initially realized. What are the various findings in the Senate report?
Well, let's start with who kind of believes what when it comes to this. When we talked about the Senate report, we found, that they agreed with the intelligence community, but there are a few people who are not on the same page as the Senate, and it's a pretty small group. It's basically President Trump, It's basically Russian President Vladimir Putin and a number of investigators in the House who are not agreeing with these conclusions from the Senate report, the same conclusions that the intelligence community put out in January 2017. Now, let's look at the people who do believe this, who do believe that Russia meddled in the 2016 election and they did it to help Trump. It's a number of these intelligence agencies that you can see right here. Special Counsel Robert Mueller, who brought a number of charges against Russian officials as well as companies, the bipartisan Senate committee, as well as Democratic House investigators. So you see President Trump is in pretty slim company when it comes to doubting this issue of whether Russia tried to meddle in the election for his benefit.
That's right, because the facts don't seem to support that position. Sarah Murray, thanks very much. I want to talk more about this with a member of the House. He's Republican Congressman Tom Reed of New York. Congressman, thanks very much for taking time on the July 4th holiday.
Well, happy 4th to you, Jim. Thanks for having me on.
So let me ask you this. Who do you side with? Do you side with your Republican comments in the House who doubt the intel community's assessment that Russia interfered in part to hurt Hillary Clinton and help Donald Trump? Or do you agree with the Senate Intelligence Committee, the various intelligence agencies?
Well, look, I do agree that Russian meddling into our election did exist. They obviously tried to influence the election like they've done for decades before and other countries have done previously. But at the end of the day, the most important factor to me was the integrity of the election process was secure. The outcome of the election and the people's voice was heard in 2016. And from my perspective, we need to wrap this investigation up and move forward because the country has problems that need to be solved.
Why is the president then still, just as recently as last week, expressing doubt that Russia was behind the interference at all?
Well, because there's no collusion. I mean, who knows what
Russia
that's
not what he denied. To be clear, he did not.
Yeah, but who knows what a Russian mind is, Jim?
No, he questioned whether Russia interfered in the election when the intelligence agencies, the Senate Intelligence Committee, are reaching very confident conclusions that that's exactly what Russia did. Why is the president doing that?
Well, I think because there's a fine line here between meddling and trying to influence by putting information out there and trying to sway the outcome of the election to a Russia conclusion that they want to achieve. But at the end of the day, the most biggest threat to the election process was the collusion or the lack of integrity of the process. And I think the president's been very clear, and I support the president's findings or conclusions on this. I see no evidence of collusion. I see no evidence of integrity of the election being broken. And so therefore, this election stands, and we should move forward. And we need to be smart that people are going to try to meddle with our election process. But I trust the wisdom of the people in making sure that they filter that information and come to their conclusions they feel best for their future.
Isn't the president doing Putin's work for him when he undermines his own intelligence agency's assessment about Russian interference in the election? Of course, Russia's going to deny it. It's not in their interest to acknowledge it. But isn't he doing Putin's work for him by expressing those doubts?
No, I do not believe that's the case. I think, what the president is dealing with is a rehashing of issues where people are threatening collusion and that the outcome of the election was persuaded not by the people but some outside force. Bottom line, the people spoke in 2016. It's time to move forward with this election that has occurred and embrace the opportunity that this administration has for us to bring change to Washington, D.C.
Let me ask you this. I've been following this story for more than 2 years now, even prior to the election, looking at election interference. I speak to both Republicans and Democrats. Both Republicans and Democrats have been briefed on the intelligence, say that the evidence is, let's set aside 2016 for a moment, that the evidence is that Russia is still performing probing attacks on not just social media, etc., but on election systems, that those attacks continue, and in fact they expect Russia to interfere again in 2018 and 2020. Why isn't the president showing leadership on this issue to defend future elections from Russian interference? And aren't you, as an American, disappointed by that?
Well, no, I believe the president does respect the election process and wants the election process to be secure, just as we do, just as I do, because that's critical to the functioning of our democracy. But to think that Russia and other countries across the world are not going to try to influence our election is just to live in denial. This has been going on for decades.
Well, the question
folks
is,
have brought their interest into our election process, and that is just the reality of the situation. We just have to be smart. We need to learn from 16.
But the question is, what are we doing about it? I mean, I'm sure you watched the hearing 2 months ago when the chiefs of the intelligence agencies, Mike Rogers of the NSA, Dan Coates of ODNI, they were asked by senators whether they'd been instructed by this president to do something about election interference, to take action to prevent those attacks? And they all answered no, unequivocally. How is that presidential leadership?
Oh, I think there's leadership there in regards to the integrity of the system, making sure that the ballot box is secure. I've seen commitments there, making sure that voter fraud and abuses are outlined too.
You can think that, but the intelligence chiefs who would do that job are saying they've been given no specific instructions by the president. I mean, you're an American. You like me want the system to be, you know, the integrity to be unchallenged there. But doesn't that disappoint you as an American?
Oh, well, but let's just be clear. Each state controls its election process and making sure that the integrity there. We in the federal obviously want an interest in making sure that the election process is secure. And there have been resources given to the states to make sure that the process is secure. And the fact is, you know, the people filter this information. People are not stupid. People get this information and they come to their own conclusions. And that's what's one of the troublesome themes I see from the other side of the aisle, that somehow the people are duped by this information. They are not. People are very smart, in my humble opinion.
Let me ask you, if I can, and I appreciate you taking the hard questions on that topic, about another topic. You're aware of the various scandals engulfing the EPA Administrator Scott Pruitt. CNN now reporting that administration officials believe that the president is losing patience with him, that it's inching towards a tipping point, one administration official told my colleague Jeff Zeleny. Do you believe it's time for Scott Pruitt to go?
You know, obviously, I have some serious concerns about the EPA director and the activity that is going on there. And I'll leave that to him to make that determination, as well as the president, who the director serves at the directive of. And so, you know, I think at the end of the day, this will take its own course, and we'll have a conclusion that makes sure that these individuals are, no one's above the law, everyone is held accountable.
I mean, would you do the kind of things or accept the kind of things that Scott Pruitt is accused of doing? Keep a secret calendar, you know, take trips that seem a little bit like boondoggles that cost a lot of money for taxpayers. Would you find that acceptable yourself?
No, I try to obviously engage as a representative of the people, making sure that they're always listened to, that we're always accessible to them, and to do things in a way that always bring, you know, that to be beyond that type of discussion and approach.
On North Korea, if I could ask you as well, because of course there are a lot of topics, there are a lot of stories in the news. You're aware that Secretary Mike Pompeo, he's heading to North Korea tomorrow, continuing these discussions with the Kim regime over their nuclear program. I'm sure you're aware of reports, including a Defense Intelligence Agency assessment, that North Korea is not denuclearizing. In fact, might be making efforts to hide some of its nuclear program. What is your assessment of the status of negotiations with North Korea? Have you seen anything from the North Korean side that gives you confidence that they're serious about this?
Well, obviously I was very hopeful and took Kim Jong-un at his word when he met with the president at the summit that he was going to commit to denuclearization. But as I stated at the time in my public statement, you know, I know the history of this dictator. I know that his irresponsible behavior is what is at the root of his operations. And I'm very concerned that if Kim Jong-un does not commit himself to peace and denuclearization, military options really will become, at some point in time, the only option that's available to take out this threat to our American coastline and to millions of Americans who could be killed in a nuclear holocaust.
Congressman Tom Reed, appreciate you taking some time out of the July 4th holiday.
Well, thanks for having me on, Jim.
Enjoy the day. Okay, coming up, mystery in the UK. 2 people collapsed just miles from where a former Russian spy was poisoned. Could this be another poisoning? We're going to go live to Scotland Yard for the latest on that story. And their discovery brought relief and elation, but now really an impossible choice: how to get them out safely. The new efforts to free a team of young soccer players trapped in a pitch-black cave. Right now, British counterterrorism officers are investigating a case with striking similarities to the poisoning earlier this year of a former Russian spy and his daughter. Here's how police described what happened to 45-year-old Charlie Rowley and 44-year-old Dawn Sturgis.
Wiltshire Police and partners have declared a major incident after 2 people were hospitalised following their potential exposure to an unknown substance in Amesbury. It was initially believed that the 2 patients fell ill after potentially using contaminated illegal drugs. However, further testing is now ongoing to establish the substance which led to these patients becoming ill.
One reason the incident is concerning is its close proximity to Salisbury. That is where Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia were found slumped on an outdoor bench in March. It was later found that they were poisoned with Novichok, a suspected military nerve agent, and the suspicion is that Russia was behind it. Senior international correspondent Nick Payton-Walsh, he is outside Scotland Yard. He's been following this story for us. Nick, what have we been learning today about this?
Well, Jim, you say there's striking similarities here. The biggest one, frankly, is the geography, which you mentioned, so close to where Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia were struck down by that Russian nerve agent, but also to the response of British officials and the British government and police. They're, of course, on the highest alert imaginable after what happened to the Skripals, but frankly, apart from the fact that counter-terrorism police have been used to try and work out what this unknown substance is, and the British government have said they're dealing with this with the utmost seriousness, to some degree that's where the similarities begin to end, because those two individuals, Charles Ruhle and Dawn Sturgis, 45 and 44 years old respectively, are locals to Wiltshire. No obvious Russia connection there on the surface at all, and it's still unknown at this stage exactly what the substance is, meaning that a longer time has elapsed now with British police on higher alert than they were before for them to identify what this substance was than it took for them to identify the Novichok nerve agent that tried to kill the Skripal couple there. This is really about an incident that seems to have happened on Saturday where this couple were at home. Something made Dawn, the younger of the two, ill in the morning. Charles fell ill later in the day. Ambulances came on both occasions, and then it was in the hours after that that the contamination began to be dealt with. We saw police in protective clothing, but still at this stage they don't know what that substance was. You've got to bear in mind here, there's a psychology here, a real sense of fear in Britain, but also a big question. There's so little connecting this to Russia. It doesn't look like a replication of the Skripal incident, but there's still the case of what is that substance, and that could be a nasty surprise, Jim.
They're certainly they're taking care with this one. Nick Payton-Walsh outside Scotland Yard there. Thanks very much. Coming up, new urgency for teams racing to save a group of young soccer players trapped deep in a cave. Heavy rain about to move in, and a rescue there needs to happen fast. And welcome back. There is a nationwide manhunt underway right now for 3 men accused of kidnapping and raping 2 teenage sisters in Ohio. The victims, they were just 13 and 14 years old. They were held against their will at a motel before they eventually turned up in an emergency room. CNN's Kaylee Hartung joining us now. Kaylee, what do we understand? There's a 4th suspect that's now in custody?
That's right, Jim. One man is already in custody in Ohio. Simon Juan Thomas is being charged with unlawful sexual conduct with a minor, but there are 3 other men who were on the run. We're told by Bowling Green police that in detectives' investigation of this case, they have found that all 4 of these men, though, have fraudulent paperwork in regards to their immigration status. Thomas, the man in custody, he's from Guatemala. Juan Adil, who you see there on the left, as well as David Contreras, are from Mexico. The 4th man, Arnolfo Ramos, his home country is unknown. Now, Bowling Green police tell us that their focus here remains on the alleged sexual assault, but with the information of these men's immigration status, ICE is involved in this manhunt as well. The police were first made aware of this incident on June 28th when the girl's mother took them to a hospital following this alleged assault. Otherwise, the details here are largely unknown. Jim, Bowling Green police telling us this is a very personal and difficult investigation for many of them.
You know, they're 13 and 14-year-old girls, and they're your daughters. So obviously it's very emotional. And it's difficult for us as officers because we have to stay objective to investigate the case. However, a lot of us have children.
3 of those men, as we've said, continue to be on the run. Jim, ICE involved in that manhunt, though when we reached out to them for comment, they said they would have no comment for us today. The last sighting of one of them, Contreras, was on Saturday afternoon at a Walmart in Holland, Ohio. Otherwise, they continue to run. Police say they are dangerous.
Just an appalling crime. Kaylee Hartung, thanks very much for following the story. Coming up, a Fox News contributor called a report about the Iran deal totally made up BS. So why did the president himself blasted out to 50 million followers. We're tracking the dubious story that went all the way to the president's Twitter feed next. Torrential rains are heading for Thailand within days, and that is adding to the urgency of a round-the-clock effort to rescue 12 boys and their soccer coach from a flooded cave where they've been trapped now for a week and a half. Dive teams were in the cave today. The kids practiced breathing with the oxygen mask they're going to need if it is decided to bring them out the same way they entered. That means going through the water. Asia correspondent Jonathan Mueller is there. Jonathan, the boys spending another night underground. I mean, what's the time frame here? It seems like it's swinging back from staying there for weeks potentially till the rains are gone to getting them out sooner. Do we have any more clarity?
Well, I'm not sure if I can offer clarity, Jim, but, you know, it just wasn't a very attractive option to have those boys stuck down there until the monsoon ended at the end of October. So there is a real sense of urgency here now, and there seems to be an effort to try to get the boys out by the way they came in, except, of course, now, unlike when they entered the cave, it's pretty much submerged. So they have, as you said, been training the kids how to use scuba gear, and hopefully there will be this window of opportunity offered by the weather. There's been another rain-free day here. It's merciful because it's allowed them to practice evacuations. There are 47 divers down there right now. The cave opening is just about 200 yards behind me here, and there are teams going up and down, and 4 divers going into the cave constantly, putting supplies in of food and medicine. The boys seem to be in reasonable condition, and I think the hope is that they will be strong enough to get out soon.
Let's hope so. It's been a long time in there. Jonathan Miller, thanks for following that story. Is the president pushing fake news on Twitter? Well, Trump attacked his predecessor, saying, quote, just out that the Obama administration granted citizenship during the terrible Iran deal negotiation to 2,500 Iranians. That bold claim coming a day after Fox News published an article claiming the same thing. The problem? Fox News cited an Iranian news agency that cited an Iranian newspaper that quoted a single Iranian cleric. And immigration data from the Department of Homeland Security does not show an uptick in Iranian immigrants during the Obama presidency. CNN senior media reporter Oliver Darcy, he's been looking into the story. He joins me now from New York. So Oliver, I mean, it seems pretty clear this was a false story. How did we get here with the president tweeting this out to 50 million people?
Well, it's certainly unnerving, and it seems to be another example of the president looking to right-wing media and consuming right-wing media, and then using what he consumes to stoke a political conspiracy theory about one of his political opponents. In this case, he took a Fox News story that was published on Monday, a very thinly sourced story, and he just effectively tweeted out the thrust of the article without fact-checking it. After the story was tweeted, Obama officials quickly refuted it last night on the Situation Room. Jake Sullivan said it was not true, and Jeff Prescott, who was the director of the National Security Council under Obama, told CNN that this is just false. He shared with us Department of Homeland Security numbers that show that there was no uptick in naturalizations of Iranians before and after the Iranian nuclear negotiations. It just remains relatively consistent through the Bush and Obama years. Nevertheless, the president went out there on Twitter and posted this false information, and here we are.
Yeah, don't let the facts get in the way of a good tweet. And yet, this sort of symbiotic relationship between Fox and the White House may be getting closer. Trump hiring a former Fox News executive, Bill Shine. What's his job going to be?
We are told at CNN that he's going to be overseeing communications. I don't think his official title has been announced yet by the White House, but it's going to be in a communications capacity, is what CNN has reported. And it's going to be interesting. You know, he is a former co-president of Fox News, now in charge of communications at the White House. And he's a buddy of Sean Hannity, so it's going to be interesting to see what the White House's communication strategy is going forward.
And of course accused of at least covering up, possibly, or not addressing accusations of sexual assault at the network. Oliver Darcy, thanks very much for digging on that story for us. That's it for me. I'm Jim Sciutto, in for Wolf today. The news continues on CNN right now.